So welcome everybody to the first webinar of this year. So we've had our new team come in, we've had a bit of prep time whilst you've been enjoying summer and getting ready for Oriel yourself. So this is the first webinar of the year and we are very, very excited to get started. So all of you listening will be somewhere in the Oriel process. You might have lots of ideas what you want. You might still be unsure of the process and sort of how to go about picking your choices. So I'll properly introduce myself. I'm Alex. I'm the Vice President of BPSA for this year. I'm actually a third year, but will be the host tonight to get all your questions answered by the rest of our group. So I'll let everybody introduce themselves. So let's start with Bella.
I am Bella. I am the president of the BPSA this year. I am currently in my training year. I'm doing a community placement in Chelsea, in London. I went to Cardiff Uni and I'm really looking forward to giving you advice tonight.
Amazing, thank you. Olivia, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Olivia. I'm the graduate officer for the BPSA. I went to Cardiff Uni and I'm currently doing my pre-reg year at Oxford University Hospitals, and I'm doing 3 months in GP and 9 months in hospital.
Brilliant, thank you. Tayo?
Hi everyone, my name is Tayo and I'm one of the annual conference organisers for this year. I went to Aston University in Birmingham and I'm currently doing my pre-reg in Aberdale Pharmacy in Sheffield, which is a community pharmacy, so for the whole year.
Brilliant, thank you. Tanya?
I'm Tanya, I'm the treasurer of the BPSA. I went to Cardiff Uni and I'm currently doing my pre-registration year at St George's Hospital, split with GP.
Excellent, thank you. So as you can all see, we've got a range of community and hospital foundation year trainees with us, but all went through the Oriel process last year. So Bella, want to get us started?
Great, thank you, Alex. So to start off, just a bit of explanation about what this webinar is about. I'm sure you've received probably lots of information already about Oriel, so you're wondering why have I come to another one. So this webinar is specifically to give advice, and I've highlighted and put in bold and underlined the word advice because it is specifically advice from the 4 panelists who are going to say either what they've done, what they wish they would have done in hindsight, what they've heard other people do, or potentially what they haven't done but they wish they had. So this webinar is not about more information about how the actual process works or explicitly saying what resources you should use to prepare for the SJTs or the calcs, etc. We're not endorsing anything, so everything will just sort of be first-hand experience. So a couple of my sort of top tips are, firstly, be proactive. I know that you're already quite a way through the process, so hopefully you would have booked your SJTs and calculations in already. But even when it comes to the rest of it, so preferencing and even just getting to the actual test centres, just make sure you know the routes beforehand, and whatever it is, just always be proactive in this process because there is a lot to do. And also know your priorities. So again, your priorities, it's really important because what yours won't be the same as someone else's, or it's very unlikely to be. And there is lots to think about, as you'll see on the next slide. So, and these are just a handful of, alongside, what sector you want to be in, etc. So I'll start with location. Have a think about, do you want to stay at home? Do you want to stay where you went for uni? Do you want to move around and explore somewhere new this for the new year that you're going to embark on? And with that comes transport. So what are the transport links like? Do you drive? Is there going to be parking? Will you be taking public transport? What is the time looking like during rush hour? Are there multiple modes of transport to take in case you know, there's a road closure, for example. Whatever it is, you know, have a think about that, because there's a lot going on in that year and it is daunting. You know, you've got to also revise for the assessment at the end and cook and clean and whatever else it may be. You know, if you're spending an hour, 2 hours each way just traveling, that's going to take a lot of time out of your weeks, of your days, you know, of the year. And then also accommodation. Are you going to live with people you know already? How easy is it to find accommodation? Are you going to be able to afford it? And again, with that comes your support network. If you are going to be moving out somewhere new, like I said already, it is, you know, quite a heavy year. It's new and you're working and, you know, you've got to revise and there's so much, again, going on. So what's your support network like? Do you want to live at home with family where you know, or, you know, if you've got a supportive family that they know they're going to be there for you, would you rather live with friends? And then just skipping one there is, how many other trainees are going to be at the same place as you? Do you prefer to have more, you know, people in the same sort of boat as you so you can interact with them? Or do you work better on your own and would you rather sort of get all that attention to yourself? And then with that training program, does your placement provide a training program and do they pay for it as well? These can be quite expensive, so it's something definitely worth thinking about. Do you get study hours? What are your working hours like? What's your salary like? And don't preference anywhere that you don't want, because, you know, you might get it and then you'll be, you know, you might be stuck at the end. So preference where you actually want to go and think about all these things when you are doing that. And then my absolute top tip is go for what you want, not what people tell you you want. So if you haven't already, you know, I'm sure at some point you'll hear people telling you that this is the best sector and that's the best sector and here's the best location and there is. But like I've said before, your priorities will be different to other people. And it's your year as a trainee pharmacist, not someone else's. So base it on what you want and go for that. Don't worry about other people. And, you know, there will be Q&As later and you will hear from the rest of the team to give their advice as well. But if you do have anything else that you don't get to ask today, or you want some more advice from myself, you can email me, tweet me, message me on LinkedIn, etc. Or even if you just want to tell me where you end up, that'd be really nice. So good luck. Please do take on our advice tonight, because hopefully you'll all find it useful and feel supported by the end of tonight's webinar.
Amazing. Thank you for getting us started, Bella. So already you've got lots of advice being fired at you. So by the end of the evening, you're hopefully going to feel a lot more confident about Oriel, about what you want and how to sort of go about it. So next we'll go to Tanya. Do you want to tell us a bit about your Oriel and your experience, please?
So like I mentioned, I was from Cardiff Uni. I'm doing a split pre-reg at the moment. So I'm doing 9 months in St. George's and 3 months in GP. This was my 5th choice and I ranked about 420 in the country. I also applied to the Scottish pre-reg because it was in the same platform as the English and Welsh one in our cohort. And I had the option to accept Glasgow, but I declined it in the end for St. George's. With preferencing, like Bella said, only preference places that you want to go to. Obviously, don't preference just one place. As amazing as you are, it's smarter to at least preference. I would recommend 100-ish. I ranked about 300 in the end. And with your no preference column, make sure that all these choices have the same weighting. So what I mean by that is that you shouldn't be preferring to go to one place over the other in your no preference column, because Oriel will assign you a place in your no preference if you don't get anything in your preference list randomly. So make sure that you've thought about what you put in your no preference. I think for mine, I didn't actually end up putting a lot in my no preference list. I mostly put them in my preference or then put the rest in my not wanted. In the program information, make sure to read the websites and don't be afraid to contact the providers as well. I didn't get the chance to do this because I left it last minute, but I know other people did, and it's quite useful because they might even send you an example of the timetable, so that might give you a feel of whether the place is right for you. And things to consider, Bella's mentioned most of these. Just to highlight the ones that she didn't mention, I think there was the size of the organization. So that's, for example, with community, independent, or chains, and with hospital, the size of the number of beds. That's what I considered, or other hospitals that are specific to a type of specialty. There's also tier 2 sponsorships for international students that you can apply the filter with on Oriel, and also accessibility. So if you have any disabilities, make sure to consider that and contact the providers as well. Yeah, don't leave it to the last minute. I did this and I had to juggle doing my dissertation and preferencing, and that did not end well. So make sure you don't do that to yourselves. So I'm quite a visual person and I'm obsessed with Excel. And this is how I rank my options. With Oriel, you can actually download the options as an Excel file. So that's what I did. Got rid of some columns and added columns that I thought was relevant. I considered the number of placements, so that's whether it's a split or not, that was important to me. The number of places available, so that is the number of pre-regis that's going to be in the placement with you. With the salary and also the number of working hours, which is usually the standard 37.5, and the cost of living. This is just a random number that I based off of an average from living costs, bills, entertainment, like going to the cinema and stuff like that. And that generated this number. There's the CQC rating, which is kind of like the Ofsted of NHS trusts, which I believe only applies to the English NHS trusts, that kind of just tells you where the trust is at and what requires improvement or what they're doing well. And they'll provide you an information section. I've also copied and pasted information that I found relevant from their website, so anything else I found about the trust. And the size, I thought that was important to me because I wanted to work at a big teaching hospital, whether it's a specialty. I wanted to go to a big hospital because I want to do as many rotations as I can, because I'm not too sure where I want to end up yet. And this is kind of just the layout of what the placement is going to be like, so how it's split. With SJTs in numeracy, I think it'll be the same for your year, whether you start off with a numeracy test first. I do want to say for numeracy is very tight for time. The questions are fairly easy, but make sure that you practice and make sure that you do it so that you get used to the time structure. I'm not too sure how long you get, but I just remember that it was very tight for time. And make sure that you get a specific calculator because you're only allowed certain ones. For SJTs, in our cohort, there was 52 scenarios and we had to do them in 104 minutes. I tried to do the scenarios in 1.5 minutes, so that gave me about 25 minutes to check. And you can flag questions if you're unsure about them, and then you can go back to it. So don't spend too much time on one question because you'll end up rushing the last questions. And SJTs directly test attributes from this thing called the Professional Attributes Framework. So it's these 4 things. I think that'll be included in your handbook, but you can refer to that. Yeah, and that's all I could think of. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if you think of anything after the session, then please feel free to email me. But other than that, good luck.
Amazing. Thank you, Tanya. We are saving most of the questions till the end, but one that's, I think, specific to the presentation you've just gone through. So in your table for how you, the Excel sheet for how you worked out what was preference, a couple of the columns like hours, number of things like that you could find on the actual sum itself. How did like the living cost value, did you work that out yourself, or was that easy to find?
I worked out the living costs myself. It was just through a website, I can't remember the name, but it was just an average of the different types of costs in that area. And then I just worked out an average. So it's just made up.
It's just, as the BPSA treasurer, you just love numbers so much. Let's go to Liv next. Can you tell us a bit how you sort of tackled both the SJTs, but also then how you end your choices?
So similar to Tanya, I ranked quite a lot. I ranked around 300 places, which in hindsight I think was a little bit too many. So just to kind of look at the numbers, I ranked 450, and I just added into the Q&A because somebody asked how many people there was in our year. So I think there was about 2,100. So I ranked 450, and I got my 10th choice, and I ranked over 300 places. So I didn't need to rank over 300 places. It's difficult because obviously I don't want to tell you not to rank 300 places and then you end up getting not getting something in your top 100. But all I would say is that I spent hours and hours and hours and hours ranking these places and then ended up getting somewhere in my top 10, and I just didn't need to spend that long doing it. From my experience, I don't know anybody that didn't get something within like their top 200. Like I literally don't know anybody. So that's just something to bear in mind. So in my numeracy, I got 7 out of 10. Maths isn't something I'm very good at. A lot of the guys here know that. And I just want to stress, similar to Tan, that the actual questions are not particularly difficult. I really struggle with maths and I found them okay. The biggest thing is just the timing. So all I would say is answer the questions and try and get through all 10. And if you have time at the end, you can go back and check them. But I think just getting them done is your priority, because if you spend ages and ages on each question, you just won't get them done. And because the questions are quite simple, you will probably get them right. So I think it's better to move on to the next question than go over it and think, did I get it right or did I not get it right? So similar with the SJTs, it's very, very tight for time. I actually had extra time in my SJTs, and I still didn't manage to finish them. I definitely had a habit of rereading the question 3 or 4 times, putting my answers, thinking, was that right? And then moving them around again, when really I should have just gone with my gut and answered them and gone back at the end if I had any extra time. So with your actual preferencing, I was similar to Tanya where I did a spreadsheet. The only thing I'd say with that is make sure you actually move it onto the Oriel process with plenty of time. So you might think, oh, I've done all my preferencing, I've got it all done, and you've got it in a spreadsheet on your computer, but it can take hours to actually transfer it from your computer onto the Oriel system. So just bear in mind. And I know that I've spoken to a couple of people about it already, and similar to our year, there's quite a lot of problems with the actual Oriel website. It can be very, very slow, especially nearer the deadline when everybody's on it. Because you're talking 2,000 people on it at one time, it can crash. So that's another reason why leave yourself plenty of time to get it onto the system, because if you don't and something goes wrong, then obviously you don't want to be dealing with that at the time. So in terms of going to the Pearson View Centre, so if any of you guys have done your driving theory tests, then you will have been to a Pearson View Centre before. If you haven't, it's quite a simple process. But there are a couple of things that you need to bear in mind specifically, is that they only accept certain calculators. So it will be in your handbook, the type of calculators that you can use. So make sure you get one of these calculators, because you won't be able to use one, unfortunately, if you don't have the correct calculator. They give you a whiteboard. you're only allowed one whiteboard, and I think you may be allowed to ask for another one, but obviously that would take up time because you'd have to put your hand up and they'd have to bring you another one. You also weren't allowed to rub out on your whiteboard. I think it's because at the end they I don't know why they like to check what you've written, but they like to check what you've written. So just make sure you write really, really small, because if you write really big, you won't fit all of your working on your whiteboard. Also with the SJT, you have to put all your stuff into a locker, so just make sure you don't bring a massive bag with you, because it wouldn't fit into the tiny little lockers that they provide. And make sure you bring your ID. If you don't bring your ID, they won't let you in. And also when I went to my SJT, somebody didn't have a mask and they weren't let in, so bear that in mind. Make sure you have a mask with you. Just having a look at my list. I guess the only thing to add, obviously there might be some questions later, is that, I don't know, I felt, for me personally, that Oriel was a very, very scary process, and it felt very out of my control. So Tan kind of touched on it a little bit, but when you come out of the SJT, you really have no idea how you've done. You could have got them all right, you could have got them all wrong, and you have no idea. And you'll talk to somebody and we'll have written different things. I guess you just got to think, wherever you place in your Oriel, it's only a year. And if you end up in the sector that you want, brilliant. And if you don't, that's not the end of the world. I'm in hospital at the moment, and there's loads of people in the hospital that did their pre-reg and have worked in community and have moved into the hospital, and also vice versa. Lots of people that worked in hospital and thought this isn't for me, and they've moved into community or GP or anything else. So if you girls are feeling a lot of fear, I feel like that's totally normal, because I definitely felt the same. But yeah, that's all I've got to say for now.
Brilliant, thank you. Lots of things covered there for your experience. So last but not least, Tayo, take it away.
Hi guys, my name is Tayo. I did my M.Pharm in Aston in Birmingham. Unlike Liv, I didn't rank that many places because I knew I wanted to go back to Sheffield, which is really small. It's a really small city up north. So I ranked I want to say 46 in total. And I still got my top 10. That's not an advice for anyone, by the way, because I knew I wanted to stay in Sheffield, because obviously to save rent, I was familiar with the place, and it paid lower than maybe if I was in Birmingham or London and all of that. So that's why I was more restricted with my ranking, but I still got my top 10. So that's just an advice to anyone. Obviously, don't restrict yourself, but if you have to look at the financial costs and all of that, then make sure that balances. The Oriel system is really clunky. There's just so much, dragging and dropping stuff can take so much time. I had to use my uni computers because they had a faster processing system compared to my laptop and my iPad. So just be wary of that. I think desktops or MacBooks work much faster, but you will find something. It will just take a bit much longer. I wasn't really daunted by the process in terms of ordering, because I ranked less places, if that makes sense. I ordered less places, so I wasn't overwhelmed. I put a lot of things in my not wanted pile. I don't think I put anything in my no preference pile, because I knew that this is exactly where I want to go. When it came to the SJTs, follow Liv's advice, take a mask. There's some in the handbook, they'll guide you on what calculators you can take. Don't panic if you don't take a calculator. They have a on-screen one in the Pearson View Center, which I know some of my friends use. So don't panic if you forget to take one. There's one there. Just be calm. With me, I had loads of time left for the SJTs. I think I had 30 minutes, to be honest, because I was just rushing through it, going through, then I went back. And with the calculations as well, it's not hard from my perspective, and I'm 50-60% on calculations. You just obviously, with all calculations, you need to take your time, just work stuff out and then move on to the next. And don't be too stressed if you don't get a question, because I think the pass mark for calculations is even low. It's really not that high. So don't be too stressed if you're thinking, oh my god, just keep on going to the next question, keep on going to the next question, keep on going to the next question, and you will probably have a couple of more minutes as well. My personal advice is that, Liv said, it's only for a year. Where you end up doing your pre-reg doesn't determine where you're going to be for the rest of your life. Pharmacy is very, 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 very vast for the rest of your life. So don't be too disheartened. Rank where you do want to go. Don't rank where you don't want to go. I was really good at that because I was like, I'm not leaving Sheffield. Like, there's nothing making me leave Sheffield. I had some friends that literally ranked all the way from like north down to the south, and they were fine with it because they were international students, so they didn't really care where they went. Some of my friends ranked only in London, Kent, and the London, Kent, Essex boroughs. Some ranked like where they were going, some ranked the Midlands. So it really is up to you with the advice that Bella and Tanya provided. Obviously, it's the financials, there's the cost. There's just so many things you obviously have to take into consideration as well. But it's only daunting if it makes you daunting, and there are friends as well that will be in the same boat as you. So obviously use each other, because I was like, we were messaging each other, practicing SJTs on each other, practicing calculations on each other, calculation questions on each other with the mocks that were provided by my uni. So don't let it overwhelm your life, but do the process in time so that you're not scrambling the night before, the day before, trying to rank and trying to practice as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So thank you all four for going through all your little aspects that make up the big picture of Oriel. So before we go to, because I can see lots and lots of questions have come in, one thing that I am going to ask you, and I'll let you chip in all on this one, is obviously we've got a combination of hospital, community and split placements. So how did you decide which sector you wanted to go in, and did that affect how you ranked all of your choices? Does anybody want to get started on that one? I saw a nod from Bella, so I'll go to Bella first.
I can, and this links to one of my top piece of advice is, which you already heard, is choose where you want to go, not what people tell you want to go. So I thought I wanted to go to hospital because that's what people told me I wanted to do, and I did rank hospital. So like I want to stay in Sheffield, I want to stay in London. I am quite a London girl, so I knew I wanted to come back at least for another year. Who knows what's happening in the future, but obviously London is competitive, you know, you hear that time and time again. So this meant that, and I guess it's another piece of advice, is going for London hospitals, I sort of knew that it'd be wise to not only stick to one sector, especially if I want to stay in London. So I did put communities down as well. And I actually ended up working in a community pharmacy for the whole of my 4th year. And I fell in love with community, I did. So when I did get into a community placement for my training year, at first I was disheartened, I really was, because again, I was told that I want to go into hospital and I should go into hospital. And it wasn't until it kind of all sank in, I fully realized that actually it's not what I want to do. I really do love community, and I'm really glad that that happened. Whether it's fate or whatever you want to call it, I don't know. But yeah, so my golden, I know I've given so many pieces of advice and I keep saying that my top tip is this, but my absolute golden, which I was going to leave till the end, which I'll just say now, is don't feel disheartened wherever you get. Please don't feel disheartened. It's not the end of the world. It's only 1 year and it doesn't define the rest of your career.
Amazing, thank you. Anybody else from maybe a different sector want to chip in about why they sort of went that route?
I can talk a little bit about why I decided to do a split placement. So I did rank some 12-month hospitals placements as well, but most of the ones that I put first were at least 3 months or 6 months in GP. I had a GP placement myself just outside of university and I really enjoyed it. And I think for me, it was just, I didn't want to do the whole year in the same place. I wanted a little bit of variety. Yeah, and I know that it depends on the placement, but for me, I've got a block of 3 months in GP and then a block of 9 months in hospital. But I know some placements work where they might have 3 days or 4 days a week in hospital and 1 or 2 days a week in GP. So that I personally think I would enjoy that because it breaks up your working week. So that's something, if you are thinking about a split placement, obviously look into how it's actually split throughout the year. So there's even more split placements as far as I'm aware for your year than there were in our year. You don't have to do a split placement. You won't be at a disadvantage if you don't. It's just a really good way for you to get experience in different sectors. And obviously you've got some placements that are split GP and community, some placements that are split GP, community and hospital, and the different months or weeks in all of them can vary. So just make sure that you're clear how many weeks you would want to spend in a different sector. Another thing to bear in mind is that although your placement might not say that it's split sector, you still might have a couple of weeks in another sector. So you might have a 12-month hospital placement, but they might provide you with 2 weeks or 4 weeks in community. I know that quite a lot of like communities and hospitals have relationship with each other, and they swap trainees throughout the year. So the hospitals that go to the community and the community trainees that go to the hospital. So that's also something to bear in mind, even though it might say on Oriel that it's a 12-month placement. Within the placement, there might be an opportunity for you to go to another sector.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next main question is, how did you prepare for SJTs and numeracy? Have you got any, besides the advice that we've already said about taking time on it, is there any specific ways that you went about it from day one?
Yeah, I can go first. So it's just with me, my thing was my uni. My uni was because obviously they had questions that were prepared and they've been like looked at and checked and made sure that it meets the standards and all of that. So that was how I prepared.
Can I just chip in and say something quickly? Is that okay?
Yeah, just keep going.
So one thing that I think is good to bear in mind is that you are answering the questions as a pre-registration pharmacist. This is in the SGTs, and not as a pharmacist. So if there is a question about, I don't know, something's gone wrong, what would you do about it? Obviously it depends on the wording of the question, but you obviously are not a pharmacist. So most of the time the answer would be that you would go and ask somebody else or speak to somebody else. So yeah, I can just think when you're sat in your SJTs, think, you know, I'm a pre-registration pharmacist. What would a pre-registration pharmacist do? Not necessarily a qualified pharmacist. Because I think sometimes when I was practicing, I'd get some of the questions wrong just because I wasn't quite sure kind of what responsibility I held. So the list of what's expected of a pre-registration pharmacist that Tanya had in her presentation is a really good thing to look over.
Just chip in as well. There's no golden rule on this, how to prepare. There really isn't. With calcs, if you've got this far, you know, going into your 4th year now of uni, and have passed, which I assume you have, if you got this far past, you know, your 3 years of calculations, chances are you'll be fine. And with that is, don't overthink it. First of all, you know, when you're sat in issues, just try and put yourself in the position if it's actually happening, and answer honestly and truthfully, because chances are what you answer, well, they will determine the place you get, and, you know, hopefully it should be the right place for you based on those answers.
Brilliant, thank you all three. So a couple of questions that have come through. So how do you decide where to live? Have you moved in with pre-regs at the similar placement? And how do you decide where's appropriate in terms of time to travel to and from work and things like, will it affect your revision? So lots of questions about accommodation. Who wants to go first on how they managed to find a place to live during foundation year?
I'll go, just because I feel like my situation's quite different to the other guys. So I am not at home. Home for me is Southampton, and I'm doing my pre-reg in Oxford. I live with 4 other foundation trainees that are doing the same pre-reg as me. So I basically contacted them before the pre-reg and said, hey, any of you looking for accommodation? And luckily they were looking for accommodation. So I'm quite lucky that I've got that support from other pre-reggers. And we live in a house that's walking distance from the hospital. Personally, I know a lot of people do have quite a long commute for pre-reg. For me, I'm not a morning person at all. So having a commute that wasn't that long was something that was quite important to me, because I struggle to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning anyway, and I don't have a long commute. So I don't know how I would do it if I had to travel a lot further. But yeah, I think if, you know, you are moving away, obviously what Bella said about whether there's one trainee or several trainees, that might be something that you want to think about more, because if you are moving away and there's also lots of people that are also moving away, that might give you a little bit more of a support network there as well.
Perfect. Anybody else want to jump in? I know we've got a few different situations, from living at home to moving away. Anybody else want to chip in on this one?
Yeah, so like I said in my earlier presentation, I live at home, so it was literally a case of coming back home. There wasn't anything logistical about it, and thankfully I have my own bedroom, so I have my own space. So when I start to like revise and all of that, I know that I'm gonna have like my own headspace. I know for some people they may not be so lucky as that, but you will need to find a designated area just to have your stuff and to be able to revise. So it can be like going to the library after, or like weekends or all that. But for me, it was just literally a case of coming back home.
Hi. So I'm in London at the moment. Just want to add that there is hospital accommodation available, usually at a cheaper price. Living in London, you might also get a surplus if you're working in hospital, like an extra £5,000 in your annual salary. Yeah, I'm living in a flat. It's just two of us at the moment. She's doing her pre-reg and guys, so it was kind of finding a place in between these two places. So I'm living a half an hour commute, which isn't too bad, but transport, even though it's like £1.50 per journey, it does add up. So again, it's something to bear in mind.
Excellent, thank you. So I hope that's covered a bit more about accommodation, but really, again, as with all of this, there's no set guide for what to do. It's just how we found it, or the girls have found it. So next thing, lots of questions come through about, is there any specific resources you use, or how did you do practicing?
I first used the websites that they provide in the applicant handbook. I think, Alex, you mentioned that there was practice paper for our year. There were, I think, around four questions that they provided us, and also a few numeracy questions. So I started out with that. And then I just typed in situational judgment questions on Google and tried to kind of find what I could. There are a few, you do have to, I think, make an account, but I think it's for free. Some of them you can pay. I personally didn't want to do that. And there's also books that you can buy. I did buy one. I'm not endorsing it as a source, like under the BPSA, and it was for medics specifically, so I just use it to kind of get a feel of what the structure of the questions will be like, but didn't take it word for word of what the answer is going to be for a pharmacy SJT. And then for numeracy tests, I just used the questions that we learned in uni, and then kind of practiced under time restriction.
I was just gonna, because I know there was, Tan mentioned about the medics book, I know there was a question about it as well. I also used a book for medics. There's a few out there that are for other healthcare professionals. I think just bear in mind, if you do use those books, that's fine. They are quite useful for like how SJTs work, and the structure of SJTs is obviously, bear in mind, they're not for pharmacists.
Amazing, brilliant. So just a final thing on SJTs. Lots of questions of how long you spent actually looking at SJTs.
For me, about 2 weeks. I didn't spend very long on SJTs at all, and my SJT was actually moved forwards just over a week, because I was planning on doing it in Southampton, and then I was in Cardiff at the moment and they went into a local lockdown. So I decided to change my SJT and move it to Cardiff. So it actually moved forwards by about 10 days. So I wasn't prepared at all. But yeah, a week to 2 weeks, I think I spent on SJTs. I would probably suggest spending a little bit longer, but there's not, like we've kind of spoken, that there's not a lot of resources around. So there's really not a lot you can do. You can't be spending months and months on SJTs, because there isn't, I don't know what you would do in that time. I would probably say shorter but more focused revision is probably better than revising for months and months.
Just to add, you don't want to get yourself stressed out already on top of having like fourth year, having final year stuff as well. Like, it's going to be your life experiences, and also like pharmacy as a whole, whether you work in a pharmacy, even if you work like in a retail environment as well, working with customer services, customers as well. So you don't want to keep doing it, because you'll get to the test day and the test center, and you'll be thinking, oh my gosh, should I put this, should I put that, should I put this, should I put that? So maybe like 1 hour a week or something like that. Talk to some friends about it. Do calculations when you can. Obviously, calculations is part of the curriculum already, but don't stress too much about SJTs, because it's more of a life experience thing.
Sorry, Tayo briefly mentioned it. Practicing with your friends, I found it really helpful to talk through people's thought process when answering SJT. So work with your peers, your colleagues. And I think with SJTs, you can kind of map it to a particular attribute from the personal attributes framework. So try to do that, try to kind of gauge what they're trying to.
Amazing. Thank you all. So on to the next big topic that we're having lots and lots of questions about is actually how you go about ranking. So we've sort of covered a few bits of what you can look at to sort of give you that idea. But when it actually comes to deciding what you put as your number one choice all the way down to your final choice that you managed to get down to, what was your process in actually putting that rank and confirming it? And then the ones, any of you that did non-preferencing, how did you also take that as a consideration as well?
I guess I've kind of already touched on this when I mentioned about priorities. So before you start preferencing places, I guess I'd say preference your priorities. I know that sounds a bit funny, but do have a think about the stuff that's being mentioned tonight, and start kind of preferencing what's on your top of your list in terms of, is it location? So Taya's mentioned a couple of times that Sheffield was a big priority for her, so that would have been something that would have been nearer, if not on top of her list. And then once you've done that, you can start using the filters on the actual preferencing page off the website. Yeah,
I can't stress enough, don't preference where you don't want to go. Like, it's not worth it. Don't do it on your no preference list. That should be a place of where you want to go, but you don't have a preference of which one will be chosen if you do get ranked in one of those places. It's not really, depends on how you work, depends on how you study for the exam, because it is on you. The pre-reg place is just there to help you, but 80% of you passing that exam is on you, and you revising for the exam, you putting in work. You can't just depend on, oh, I'm doing it at a hospital, so definitely I'm going to pass it.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you, Taya, for picking up on that last one. So while you're having your last minute thoughts, I know we've hit a lot of advice for you. So we're just going to go through things that are coming up over the next few weeks, and we'll finish the session with everybody's last and final tip of the session. So you've had lots of little advice, but just the go-to message from everybody's experience. So our next event is by Liv. Do you want to tell us about your event next week?
So basically next week is a Wednesday webinar for our graduate members. But if you are fourth year and you feel like that the webinar could be useful to you, you are more than welcome to come. So the webinar is going to be hearing from basically the year above what we are all now. So people that have just finished their pre-registration year and are currently prov-reggers and are waiting to hear back from their exam very, very soon. And it's just going to be very similar to this, a very casual Q&A and talking about their experience of how they found their pre-reg year and any sort of tips that they would have for dealing with work-life balance or completing all the things that the GPHC require you to do and HEE require you to do during your pre-reg year. As I said, it probably is more tailored towards current foundation trainees, but I've actually had a couple of emails from people in fourth year already that have said that they're quite interested in it. So if you want to get a head start and find out more about your pre-reg year, you're more than welcome to come along.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I know that Olivia did just say that it was probably more tailored towards current trainee pharmacists. I know that your current hurdle at the moment seems like Oriel, and quite rightly so. But this actually might be beneficial for your Oriel process. We've talked about prioritizing, figuring out, what to think about. So potentially understanding what the year is going to look like and be like, and getting advice on that year might be useful to know what to look for when thinking about priorities and thinking about preferencing.
Excellent. So what's your takeaway message? So somebody that's looking at going through Oriel right now, what is the final tip for them?
Probably my biggest thing would be don't leave it to the last minute, because I can remember the feeling I had the night before the deadline. The website was crashing, sat there, and we were trying it on different laptops because we didn't know whether it was our laptop or whether it was the website. Just don't put yourself in that position. Get it done within enough time that if there are any technical difficulties, it won't affect you.
Don't panic if you don't get where you want to go. Pharmacy is such a long career. Like if you choose to stay in it, obviously, you're gonna be fine. Don't stress. Just do the best that you can.
I was gonna say that don't leave it to last minute one, but another thing, any experience is good experience as long as you're proactive. So try to take as much as you can from the experience that you get.
Do what you want, go for what you want, not what other people tell you want. That is my absolute takeaway. It's a year. Don't feel disheartened, but make the most of it. Good luck, all the best, and yeah, if you can, let us know where you end up, and we're looking forward to hearing it. And we really hope that the advice tonight has helped you in whatever way, you came here to get advice, and you feel more supported, because that's what we're here for. So thank you for coming, and all the best.
Brilliant. What a great one to finish on. So thank you all for your advice and tips. So last year, you are the ones with the most recent experience. So thank you for sharing all of your journeys, whether it starts with Excel spreadsheets or practicing for the numeracy. Thank you for your input. And I know lots of people have really session and taken a lot out from it. If you do have any specific questions that you think about later, you can get in touch with us, either sending us an email to BPSA or on the BPSA website to executive. You can find our individual contacts. If it's, say you've got an email for a question for Tan about her experience, you can send it directly or get in touch with BPSA on any of the channels. We'll pass it to the right person and then get that question answered for you. So that is the end of this webinar, the first one of the year, with plenty more on its way. So very, very exciting. So thank you once again to Bella, Tayo, Livia and Tanya. Hope you've all had an amazing session, learned a lot. So have a good evening, and we will see you all soon.